Hello and welcome to this really special program. I've enjoyed reading this book and I really find, and I do find it instructive and a deep analysis, but most of all, it's easy to read. I'm really impressed by the fact that you haven't got graphs and charts and data all over. You actually written some good, simple English. Did you really write this?
But I thought you said that about the economic survey too.
Yeah, every time. Did you really write it? But actually I've been told that once you were given a chart or a set of charts for a chapter, you churn out the chapter in a few hours. You enjoy writing?
I enjoy writing. I do enjoy writing. And, I enjoy writing and I do enjoy having the sense that I want to write it to make it accessible and have it as widely read as possible.
Yes, this is very accessible, I must say. But, for an academic and an intellectual like me, I find...
Bit below your grade, below your pay grade.
Actually, it's exactly my pay grade. Well, what it really does is it looks in depth in many issues in the economy and simplifies them and is quite prescient. And many people who have kind of said that you didn't say all this earlier, but you're saying it now, I don't agree. In fact, I want to criticize you by saying you were tougher if you read between the lines in the economic survey than you are here.
Yeah, actually, that's firstly, thank you, Prannoy, for saying this, even though it may
I want you to be tougher here.
Okay, so but let's discuss whether I've been tough or not.
Yes.
But that's a very good comment. And
no, it's true. You did say a lot of things in the economic survey, which you and we'll come to them.
We'll come to them, yeah.
Which, of course, had to be more analytical and not really upfront and saying this is not good. But it was very clear what you thought of many of them. So I'd like to kind of divide your book into, I can't do the whole thing, but take some highlights, maybe in 3 sections. So the first section is the kind of problems, the underlying problems you talk about in the Indian economy. Then we look at certain sectors and then finally end up looking forward. So first of all, let's look at what this book talks about, the underlying problems of the Indian economy. Now, one of the key underlying problems, the first one, we're going to highlight just 3. Key one is the banking crisis. Now, in the banking crisis, just look at the kind of problems that it has faced over years. Now, the reported bad loans are so far below estimated actual bad loans. Now, this is estimated actual bad debt by a private bank, this is a graph from your book. Look at what happened around about 2015. Reported bad loans were 2 lakh crores. Actual estimated was 12 lakh crores. That is like a ridiculously big difference. And then Raghuram Rajan did come in and he wanted people to declare their loans much more and declare their balance sheets, open it up much more, which you write in your book. And then reported went up to 10 lakhs and still quite far below the estimated, which is about 14 lakh crores. That's a huge amount. Now, how really serious is the banking crisis in India?
See, I think that the first thing to say is that the size of the potential NPAs is quite large.
NPAs meaning
non-performing assets, what you call the bad debt. Okay? Non-performing
debts,
assets, it's quite large. And it's been festering for a very long time.
That's the point.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the point. Look, around 2011, 10-11, I think is when we got the first indication from Ashish Gupta of Credit Suisse, who I say is one of the heroes of the story, saying early on that actually there's a lot of stuff coming. And so it's been almost 8-9 years now and counting, and we've only begun to address the problem, right? And so, this twin balance sheet it's like a Damocles sword over the economy.
You'll have to explain what a twin balance sheet is. Balance sheet problems in the companies which cause the banks to also have a balance sheet problem.
Exactly.
So twin means the company and bank.
Balance, sorry, thanks for
you
stopping.
You intellectuals.
No, it is very true. So I think it's taken a long time. I think the government deserves a lot of credit for enacting the IBC. if you remember, I had wanted a bad bank to be created, i.e.
Yes.
something different from what was done.
Right.
But I've come to accept as the reality of India that we need a judicial solution or a framework for solving these problems.
Right.
So we began that around 2016, 2017. So I think we've started.
No, but from 2008-9 till 2016, was the RBI asleep? I mean, this is just letting something fester right under your nose.
Can we go back to that chart? Can we go back to the chart?
We'll go right back to it.
In terms, I think, I want to be very fair to everyone here.
Yes.
I think, as you quite rightly said, I think when Raghu came and said, let's do the deep dive and get in 2015, I think that was a really very welcome, positive step forward, which really helped.
And you can see how the
reported goes up. But the question is that, what about the previous 6-7 years?
Yeah.
Why didn't we have this earlier? And when you talk about the reported bad loans or the RBI's estimates, they did this for the worst case scenario. They said if everything blows up, it'll still be only 2 lakh crores. So they were really behind the curve on that. I think, and I think that delay in recognizing the problem, I think also delayed action on the problem. But that's bygones. Now we are where we are.
But the worry is that we thought the worst was over, things have been declared, but now you've got these NBFCs,
Correct.
which we should explain are non-banking banks, actually. They're informal, I mean, not informal, but companies that lend, which are not specified as banks, NBFCs.
I think the difference, for viewers is that NBFCs don't accept deposits from customers like banks do. And because of that, they don't have the same level of scrutiny and regulation that banks do. So in a sense, you could think of this as 2 models. The boring, low reward, low risk, which is meant to be banking, and the high reward, high risk, which is NBFCs. So they're 2 different models.
Quite right.
And so now coming back to this, so now we've had this for a long time. We were
and now suddenly these NBFCs,
and now we have
ILFS, deep trouble. So how bad is it? Can we have a Lehman Brothers?
See, I think that India will never, have, luckily we're a resilient enough economy, and it's still not big enough, like in China, to cause a major blow up at all. We're not in that situation. Besides, we're taking action. But I think what one of my new proposals would be, just as we did this deep dive scrutiny of the loans of the banking system, I think now we have to do the same for the non-bank financial companies. So like an AQR that Raghu did for the banks.
AQR. Explain that.
Asset Quality Review. So banks.
How good is your assets, your loans that you've given?
How good are your loans?
Are you ever going to get them back? A proper review for NBFCs also.
Because remember, there's a lot of incentive here to kind of downplay the problem. And what the Asset Quality Review was, stripped away all the kind of obfuscation and whatever, hide, pretend, all of the going on, and got to grips with that.
This is the reality.
This is the reality. And then, I just to be a little bit self-referential, when all this was happening, I said there's a Subramanian law of non-recognition. That is, which is that at any point in time, the bad assets in the system are at least 25-30% more than what you think they are and what anyone tells you they are. And it's turned out to be true.
It has. So I just
but just one last thing, Prannoy, is that, you see, I think there was a delay in getting to grips with the problem. Then government acted, RBI acted, we've got things. But this ILFS has come out of the blue.
That's what I'm saying.
90,000 crores. And again, you wonder, where was the regulator? Where was everyone? Where were the other actors?
From AAA rating to D rating overnight. I mean, that was borderline layman.
That was. So I think, therefore, we now need to come to the grips of the problem and have a proper review
of the assets.
The deep dive of the NBFCs.
That's a very good prescription.
And then take it forward and then do all the things.
So can I ask you, this huge amount of bad debts where loans, and you've mentioned companies, you've mentioned, I think, SR, Adani, you've mentioned all their names, they've been given lakhs of crores and they haven't been able to pay it back. Why were they given so much money? There are 2 reasons you kind of explore. I just want to know what's relatively more important. One is there was optimism, the economy was growing, they thought, they'll be able to pay back, and genuinely got it wrong. Or was there a phone call from the government saying, and any government, I'm not talking about this government, last government, look, you're a public sector bank, you're under me, give the loan to this company.
See, I think, to be fair, there were three categories, the third category. One, I think the category that perhaps one could mention also is that lots of, good loans were also made, right? Infrastructure was built. That was, I think, the NPAs are still only whatever, 10, 15, 20%, it's not 80%. So there were good loans also made. That's the bulk. But there were these two categories, which quite rightly said. I think the good faith but errors of judgment, especially, I think, it's easy to overlook today what the mood was in 2004, 5, 6. People thought that this would be, the Indian economy would grow gangbusters forever and ever. So, irrational exuberance, as it were. And then the second, the phone call loan, right? Now, it's in the nature of this that you will never know
the extent of
the extent of the two. You will never know how many phone calls were made, etc. Right?
Except that. The extent of it is slightly exposed by the fact that private banks didn't quite go through this bad NPA as much as the public sector banks.
That's a good point.
So this phone call seems to be rather predominant.
Yeah, I think we have to come to accept and be honest about accepting that public sector. It's not that having private banks is a panacea or a cure-all, right? But with public sector banks, you have this extra layer of,
government interference.
Government interference, amenable to political interference, government interference, so on. And I think we did have some of that.
Some of that. Understatement of the year. On that understatement, let's look at the second underlying problem that Arvind Subramanian highlights, and that is the problem of moving from crony socialism to stigmatized capitalism. Now, those are lovely phrases. Once I read the book, I understood what you meant. Crony capitalism, what people used to call it, and you call it crony socialism in the past, to stigmatized capitalism. Explain what you meant by both these.
See, I think that first crony socialism, right? It's one of the funny things about India that in the past, if you go back, to even the very successful big business, people that did well, you were never really sure whether they did well because
they got a license.
They got a license, or because they were a phone call license, or because they were genuinely competitive,
good at this,
right? So that is the kind of stigma that came with, and my view was that, so we had that experience. We then had, I would say, a brief period where I think capitalism, everyone felt, was genuinely good, which was the IT boom, right? People said the IT companies, they've grown not because of proximity, but because of being distant from government. They established themselves in the world, listings on foreign, brilliantly.
You write about Infosys. And
exactly, and all of that. Then we had again the whole, what I call the rents raj, right? The whole, 2G, whatever, coal, all of that. So now we're in a situation where the private sector carries the stigma, right? So
that they've got there not fairly and squarely by some.
And so
that's the stigmatized capitalism.
But the stigmatized capitalism also, there's also a stigma there's a private sector, but also the stigma of the government of being actively complicit in this. So in a sense, we have both the state and markets which are, kind of deeply, stigmatized. And so they don't have as much legitimacy as they should. Now, why is that important in the context of the banking crisis? That, you see, now you have to get out of it. How do you get out of it? You have to write off loans, right? You have to write off loans. That means that you have to, whatever, right? The fat cats are going to get away. But then you have to get out of it. But then you don't trust, decisions
by any government
thing
or any politician that they will actually do it fairly. So there's a stigma attached. And so you mentioned that getting in is easy, but getting out is tough in India. There's no exits.
Because of this, because of stigmatization.
Because people don't trust.
And so therefore another consequence of this is, therefore, what is the, locus or which institution has at least the residual legitimacy to take these decisions, it's the courts, and especially Supreme Court. That's why I have a phrase here which I would like to share with everyone. Is I say, because of all of this whole pathology of syndromes, the king is dead, long live the justices. So in a sense, that's
and they're under pressure as well, and they're fighting, and we are proud of them.
But it's not a long run equilibrium, because you want the executive and the public sector to take decisions on these things, in a bold and brave fashion, without having to, constantly look back and, worry about the 4 C's. So I think that willy-nilly now, long live the justices, but it's not a long-run equilibrium. We have to get back to some re-equilibration of this balance.
People have to be able to exit. And I'm going to admit something to you, don't quote me, although this is on television. Am I dumb or am I dumb? That the media has quite a lot to do this. We go mad about, this, how come this guy is getting away with. I do feel, for example, when you talk about exit, here's Vijay Mallya. The media has just slammed him without doing proper analysis. For example, his is 1/10 the amount of loans that others are not paying back. He's ready to pay back his entire capital. But frankly, the politicians and the media together just are slamming him. At least get back his capital and move ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know this particular case, but I think that the getting ahead that you said is what is so difficult under conditions of stigmatized cap. And it's something that's...
Exits are tough.
Very tough, very tough. And which is why, see, and coming back to, you said about the phone calls, the public sector banks. I think the other reason why I think we should get out of this public sector banking as much as I'm not saying completely, is that when the public sector lends to the private companies, you have this problem. Exit. If you make bad, you can't exit. With private to private, at least, you can kind of get out of it. Government is not implicated.
Well, let me tell you, after the 2009-2010 crisis, banks abroad were taking a haircut of 70% on capital and saying forget interest, or even 50% on capital. Many of these...
post-Lehman thing. And that is not possible
in India.
And therefore...
Because of the stigmatized capitalism.
And because
that's a very good point.
And public sector banks lending to private sector companies...
You can be nasty about the media, no problem.
No, I'm very much of the Prannoy school of no gotcha, no balance, and...
I have to admit that the media is a bit sensational on all these issues. And it's tough for anybody to function, but fortunately the courts don't believe the media.
Well, I think,
hopefully,
exactly. I think courts are getting involved, and I think I'm hoping that with this IBC framework, it's I think it's a really a transformational step forward, but things are taking time there. I think if we can accelerate the process,
speed is too slow. Let's look at the third big underlying problem that is highlighted in this book. Of course, there are many, but I've just chosen 3, and that is farmers' distress. You have you've written a lot about this, and some of it, what you write, is quite unusual, controversial. So what is the underlying cause, do you feel, for farmers' distress in India?
See, I think that there are historical origins to this. I think because we have faced scarcity in the past, droughts, etc., we said we have to get, our cereals, self-sufficiency in cereals, right? And I think we made tremendous progress. We had great Indian scientists, we had foreign technology.
By the way, I did my PhD in agriculture.
I know, exactly.
Better be careful of every word you say.
Exactly. And so I think it was a big success. We had this, the Green Revolution.
Yes.
We really cracked the problem of famines and droughts and lack of things. And so the cereal sector, I think, has not done badly at all in India. And we had this policy of giving minimum support prices. But because that was seen to be politically important, I think we also backed it up with procurement. And then over time, this has been self-perpetuating,
Too much focus on cereals, you write.
And over time, it's become too much.
And we've got, 100 million tons of food grain?
Food grain.
Which we don't need that much.
Well,
and your shortage on, as you write, pulses.
Yeah.
Which I totally agree. Our method of minimum support prices has changed cropping patterns so much that you're short on certain crops and got too much. That's what you write, right?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things now. But now coming to the current situation, what has happened, which I think is very interesting and unusual, is, see, when you have droughts, farmers are under stress and distress, right? But when you have good monsoons, you expect farm incomes to do well. But what has been distinctive about the last 5-6 agricultural seasons, you've had good monsoons, but prices have collapsed so much, again outside cereals, that farm incomes are under stress. And this should not be happening. And I don't think we fully understand why this is happening. But what it means is that the old remedies of, we will try and do MSP and procurement for all these other crops, is not working. So I think we need to move towards new policies. And my own view is that I think I'd make two big picture, big responses. One, I think, is about what needs to be done. I think we need to think seriously about having direct benefit transfers to farmers to ensure that they get a minimum amount of income.
Yes, we are going to come to that because I was very interested to read what you said about UBI. Yes.
The second is about process. Is that increasingly something like agriculture is not something that either the center or the states can do alone. Now, they have to come together to do this, right? Now, the MSP, for example, is an instrument that the center can use. So it uses it in order to, say, we can help farmers.
Right.
But it's not the best way of it. See, I think nobody denies that help needs to be provided. Absolutely. Right. But how you do it is the most important thing. So I think you need to think about incomes, and you need to think what I call cooperative federalism, what we did in GST. I call that a technology. I call cooperative federalism a technology.
Yes.
And that technology needs to be used, power, especially agriculture. Right. Let me give you one example of how this can come about in agriculture. And we can maybe segue into the universal basic income. Supposing based on my discussions with at least a few chief ministers, many of them, I think, like this idea very much, right? But they have resource constraints.
Which idea? You're talking about
giving direct benefit transfers.
Universal basic income. That means giving a certain amount to everyone.
And beginning maybe with farmers, right? Because there's agricultural stress. Yeah? I think it's an idea that many chief ministers want to try, but they're resource constrained. Now, the beauty about India is that when a state wants to do something like this, one option we have is the states tell the center, look, you are giving us a lot of money for all kinds of schemes, right? Allow us to choose how to use at least some of this money. In the old days, in the aid literature, we call this tied aid. You give money, but you say you have to use it
only for these.
Yeah. And we always railed against that, the Marxists, the internationalists.
No, anybody said, if England wants to give us money, don't say only spend it on English products.
Exactly. And exactly. So here, similarly, we could say untie the aid. And
more federalism.
More federalism. And states, at least some states, will then experiment with, implementing this. And then again, we can have, if it succeeds, the idea spreading to other states. My own view is that, what Telangana has tried to do with this Raitu Bandhu scheme, I mean, it's not perfect, it's still populist, it doesn't have enough checks and balances, but I call this a embryonic quasi-universal basic income.
Just to be clear to everybody, Raitu Bandhu scheme is where they give 4,000 rupees per acre, per crop, per season. So 8,000 rupees per acre per year to a farmer. And yes, it's very popular, but there's a slight problem again. Large farmers with 300 acres, 200 acres sitting in Hyderabad are collecting this money. Tenant farmers are not getting it. Landless laborer are not.
Very good point.
So again, people are saying at least limit it to 15 acres. Don't give it somebody who's got 30 acres, don't give him all 30 acres.
Yeah. You see, in this, Prannoy, I think that in a sense it epitomizes something about our social welfare programs in general. You see, the dilemma for all these social welfare programs always is we say we want to target, we want to find the poorest, and we know what that leads to.
That leads to arbitrariness, the selection.
Exactly, and then the leakage, the gaming, all kinds of things, right? One of the beauties or the virtues of a universal basic income is
you don't have to.
Yeah. Yes, you pay a cost, you give it also to the undeserving, but at least you make sure you give it to all the deserving.
So I think it's simple to have a cutoff of 15 acres.
In this case, maybe it's easy to implement.
Everybody below 15 acres.
Yeah. But you would still have the problem that you said,
tenants.
The tenants versus things. And there again,
just
it's
give
a
it to
trade-off.
everybody. That's your UBI,
exactly.
Universal Basic Income.
Exactly.
I want to ask you, you have a graph in your agricultural section, which is really shocking. If we look at India's low productivity in agriculture, it really is terrifying. The annual income per farmer in India in dollar terms, and this is 2016 or 2015 prices, don't worry, is $715 a year. And if you look at it in China, it is 2,652. And if you look at it in America, of course, it's about 70,000. But China, for ours is 715, China is 2,652. China is almost 3.5 times us. So very low productivity. And now we are saying we're going to double agricultural incomes by 2022. What do you think of that, honestly?
I think that agriculture...
Be honest.
Yeah. But remember, I'll come to that. I don't think, you can achieve that by raising agricultural productivity, because you cannot get those agricultural productivity increases over that short
In 5 years, doubling is like never in any country.
But remember, you have other options for doing, like the UBI. You can double incomes.
No, productivity.
But productivity, you can't. That's going to be
One
very
more
different.
thing which you do write about, I want to touch upon it. There's a big section on the cow economy and the terminal value of the cow and how we are ruining the cow economy. Explain that a bit.
You see, I think that, in the mid...
And it's not controversial. You got it in your book. So
in the mid-2000s, right, our agricultural exports were doing brilliantly. And our livestock exports, we are the world's biggest exporter of, I'm told, buffalo, or, it's a big thing, provides a lot of livelihood to people. I think that when social policies are enacted, unmindful of their economic consequences, I think it can impose a huge cost.
Yes.
I think that, the way I put it was saying that, the terminal value of livestock would be negatively affected. Basically, what it means is that,
you can't sell a cow after it's non-productive.
Yeah,
By the way, you're spot on. We met so many farmers who are really saying, look, we get milk for so many years, then we stop getting milk, and then we used to be able to sell the cow at the end. Now we can't, and it's affecting their livelihood. This cow becomes just expenditure, no potential income. It's lowering the income of farmers.
It's not, it's worse, Prannoy.
Worse.
It's expenditure, as you rightly said. Then, if you can't look after the cow, disease, and then you get social costs from that.
Yes.
So it's not just private costs, but society.
Very serious issue.
Society pays. So I think that for all these reasons, I think that we should seriously reevaluate these policies, because
reevaluate the cow policies in India.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I want to move on to the second part, which is the current controversies which you talk about head on. And here I do feel people have been wrong. Talk about demonetization be draconian. If you ask me, you are as tough on it in the economic surveys. A little bit you had to read between the lines, but I did, unfortunately for you. And you were very controversial. You were never part and parcel of this. Was it a bad idea, badly implemented? Unlike the GST, a good idea, badly implemented. But we'll come to the GST later. First this. A bad idea, badly implemented.
See, I think, Prannoy,
don't worry about the controversy.
No. See, in the book, I think we have to be, absolutely candid here.
Yes.
See, in the book, I don't make, don't reinvent the wheel on demonetization, because, as you said, written about in the survey, reams have been written. See, and also it's again, stokes political controversy. They say this, this. See, in this...
No, I think you would say this, whether, because you're an economist, whether it was a Congress government, left front government, BJP government, you would criticize, like every economist around the world has criticized demonetization.
See, but in this book, that people have done that, said that, but in the book,
And you believe that?
No, but
avoiding saying that.
But see, what I really want to focus on is, I want to learn from this experience,
Right.
okay? And to me, the learning is, I posed it in the form of two puzzles. Right.
How come the GDP didn't go down further?
No, I'll come to that in a second.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
So there are two puzzles which I think are very serious questions. One is, this did, as you said, and as I said, everyone said, it did impose a lot of hardship on the informal sector, right? But despite that, it was apparently rewarded and validated in the UP election.
That's where you're talking to the wrong person.
Yeah.
It's wrong to say it was validated in the UP election. The UP election was won because of a divided opposition vote, not by an increase in popularity. So I wouldn't go by.
No. But now here's the point.
Yeah.
I raised the puzzle. I would like people like you to say, wrong, puzzle is wrong for A, B, C reason.
Yeah, and the second one you raised
but there's an important...
Fair enough.
I'll tell you, there's a lesson that I want to learn from this, which is that supposing I'm right, and I could be wrong, and you could be right, I could be wrong, but supposing I'm right, okay, what does it say about the politics of taking action?
Right.
Policy action.
Interesting. Yeah.
To me, what the lesson I learned from it is that it seems to be the case that it's easier to take action where the costs are spread out, are imposed on a lot of people, than where the costs are narrowly focused.
Yes.
So it's more difficult to take on vested interests than it is to impose costs on.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's a political.
That's probably true. Even rewards.
Yeah,
if you give rewards to a few and not to everybody, there's resentment.
Yeah. But the cost thing is a bit different. You would say that lower the cost. But the second one.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to move on to GST, but second one.
The
first.
second one, and let's think, is the whole draconian whatever, right? What I say in the book very clearly is that the draconian was about the 86% cash reduction, right? I mean, you ask anyone, when you take away 86% cash, you can call it, in the survey we call it a large structural shock, you can call it severe, you can call it draconian, but the point was it was meant to be extreme, that was the point of demonetization.
Although,
and I had breakfast with Paul Krugman in December, to
yes,
talk
you're
about
right about that.
how do you model this? And any economist would tell you that if you cut the money supply by 86, cash by 86, the costs are going to be huge.
Right.
Huge. Orders of magnitude different from what turned out. So the puzzle is, why is that this quote-unquote extreme action led to a very minimal...
But I find that less tough than you were in your economic survey. And while people will ask, and we've got tweets actually saying, why didn't you speak up earlier?
No, as I said, as you said for me on my behalf.
I want you to say it.
Yeah, what I've said here is exactly what I've said earlier.
In fact, I feel you're less here than in your economic survey. Let me tell you, would you ever, let me ask you, would you ever recommend demonetization again to any government that comes in the future? Yes or no?
That's
yes or no?
If I'm in that position, if I'm in that position, I will take into account all the factors, and
That is the most ridiculous and unfair answer I've ever heard. Answer is no. You would not recommend demonetization.
I would say if political capital could be better spent, there are lots of better ways of spending political capital.
Bring out the violence now at this stage. Move on to GST. He hates demonetization. Read between the lines. Now, GST versus demonetization. GST, was it a good idea with bad implementation? Again, I'll go back to the survey, and we discussed it. You wanted one main rate. You had support in many chief ministers. You mentioned that. Now they've got 4 rates. You can't imagine the hardship. One bill, this has got walnuts in it. This has got cashew nuts. They've got a different rate or something like that. Everybody's confused. Why didn't we have one rate? This is terrible implementation. People are suffering.
So I would go back to your chart. I would say great idea, but design and implementation didn't
could
quite,
be better.
Yeah, could have been much better, right? Let's take your thing head on, Prannoy. Prannoy, I think that the notion that in India you can have one rate is out of the question.
No, you had one rate for 90% of products.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think
roughly one rate.
I think the ideal thing in Indian conditions would be one for most, and then a high and a low, right?
Correct.
Yeah. That would be
and very few in the high and low, so
exactly.
it's no problem.
Exactly. I think the debate should be about that. I still think we should have gone that way.
And we should still go that way.
We should still go that way, but I think it's doable. The high
revenue fine will be revenue neutral by having one rate?
Yeah,
I think you calculated that. One more thing I want to ask you about revenues that I think you also did predict, and the government is expecting 1 lakh crores every month. It's not achieving that. Why?
Now, Prannoy, very important point to make, okay? In fact, I just mentioned this to the minister on this, is that, look, there are two different things going on here. One is the GST doing well? Second, what is the budget demanding of the GST?
Yeah, okay.
I think the budget has made some fairly unreasonable demands on the GST, right? 16, 17% growth. Right. Assessing the GST should be, given the economy, is it performing well? And I think that relative to that, also don't forget this year, lots of rates were slashed. So if the economy is growing at about 11, 12%, or maybe 11, GST delivers 12, 13%, I think we'd have done well. So let's see at the end of the year. Right. I'm still hopeful that can happen.
This 1 lakh you feel is 1 lakh crore every month is an unreasonable demand.
Yeah.
And we're falling short of a excessive demand by the budget.
At the end of the year, I think, we must, at the end of the year, relative to GDP growth, if GST revenues have not grown at that or slightly higher, then I think we should say, then it is a problem.
Okay. Moving on to the third current controversy, that's the RBI versus the government. Is the government trying to raid the RBI's balance sheet? Now, you're fairly, I wouldn't say sympathetic with the government, but you're slightly critical of the RBI, saying, look, the RBI needs to accept criticism as well. I mean, look what it did, slept on the fact that we discussed bad loans were around for so long.
Correct.
But you're not saying that the RBI should lose its independence, are you?
Absolutely. I think I think that the RBI is one of India's most respected, legitimate
and
institutions.
let not another institution go.
And for good reasons. I mean, let's be fair. I think they've done a very good job over the years for very good reason, right? I think that is, almost sacred and inviolate. I think we have to maintain that. But I think where we need to be a little bit more nuanced is that independence does not preclude, I would say, in fact, requires cooperation, consultation, communication, all of these. Right. So I think we need both. We need both and openness. Now, coming to this specific question of the raiding the RBI's balance sheet, let's tell viewers what the issue is together.
Yes, please.
So the issue is whether, the government is the owner of the RBI, whether the government has a lot of capital in the RBI, more than it needs.
Whether the RBI has got excess capital.
Excess capital, right?
And should it give it to the government?
Yeah.
Now, all of us are terrified.
Exactly.
They'll give it to the government, they'll waive loans, they'll go freebies, they'll do something.
Very true. So let me be clear. I think there's a technical issue, right? And there, in fact, today, Abhishek and Navu are here. The two of them, Josh and I, we have a technical piece in EPW.
The two researchers who wrote your book actually for you.
Exactly. Everything is done by my team. There's a technical issue, and there we are pretty confident that technically speaking, the government has a lot of excess capital. I think, right?
Like, for example, we've got 100 million tons of food grains. We need 30, 40 million, but they've got 50, 60 million too much.
Mr. Agriculture is a very good analogy. Very good analogy. Excellent analogy. Exactly. Now, that's a technical issue. But I think that part of the problem has arisen because the RBI has not been open to discussing this as a technical issue. Right. That's part of the problem, but we'll leave that aside. But I think that technical analysis does not automatically flow into the obvious policy recommendation. And let me be very clear, it's very important.
Yes.
One, there is excess reserves, right? Two, it should be deployed, but only for recapitalizing the banks, and only if that recapitalization is done along with reforms of the banks. Two,
That's very crucial statement. So the excess capital should not go to the government, it should go to banks. That's huge difference.
It should, and let me emphasize that, it should not go towards routine financing of spending, balance sheet, the deficit financing. That would
should
amount
not
to
go to deficit financing.
That would amount to raiding the RBI. And
that'll be the end of the RBI's independence.
And the third, it should be done cooperatively and mutually. See, let me be honest with you here, and this is something I say in the book, that we've got into this situation where the government appears to be raiding the RBI, right? One of the things I say in the book is that, if you could turn around the question, the thing, and say, why didn't the RBI, voluntarily say back 3-4 years ago, look, we need money for this problem. We, the RBI, will take the risk and put this money to
banks.
But we will do it conditional on you, the government, doing A, B, C, D.
That would have been a good...
I call that the Draghi moment missed.
Right, very good point.
Remember Mario Draghi said, I'll do whatever it takes. That, I think, is the kind of, imaginative boldness that I think we needed.
But the fear always is that the government actually wants it for their deficit. And that was where the raiding came in. RBI, you're right, doesn't really give the foundation of why it thinks it needs so much. It doesn't give its technical reasons.
Exactly.
It needs to be more open and
very
transparent.
Good point. Very good point.
And I think you mentioned it in the book. I'm learning from your book.
No.
Sorry, my original.
No, I think it's a very good point, and therefore, but I'm glad that I think where the compromise or the solution, which is a very good one, which is have a technical committee to evaluate that, and then you can decide, right?
But use it for banks, not for the budget deficit.
100%.
I'm very glad you started off by saying the RBI is one of the finest institutions.
Absolutely.
It needs to be independent. Why are they putting political appointees on the board? Is that correct thing to do, or is that shocking?
You see, again, I don't like to get ad hominem or personal about these things. I think these are
decisions. It can be any political appointee.
But I think that part of maintaining...
And can be any government. All governments do this.
And perhaps it's a good point. But part of maintaining functional autonomy, real auto-independence, is not to politicize the board. I think the board should not be politicized. I think and here it's a bit like, not only must it not be done, it must not be seen to be done either. I mean, the perception thing is very important here.
Absolutely right.
And that's very, very important. And also a final point is that the perception is not because we want to satisfy some international investor. It is, or some foreign thing. We need this for our own sake.
Exactly. Let's move on to our last section very quickly, and that is looking ahead now. First thing, when we look ahead, we want to understand what you've written about rich states versus poor states. And you have an interesting graphic there of how much it has changed, how much rich states are increasingly being forced to or helping poor states. If you look right back in, it used to be 22% way back in 1992. 22% of tax used to be redistributed from a rich state to a poor state. Now in 2018 or 2014 to 18, it's 32%. So 22% it used to go from the rich states to the poor states. Now it's 32%. And you are saying maybe that's too much, maybe it's disincentive for the rich state.
Yeah, I think this is, this is again some analysis we did towards the end of my tenure, again with my colleagues. And, the whole Finance Commission debate, I just wanted to provide some intellectual, analytical inputs into this. You see, I think that we need to be a little bit honest about many of these things, right? Because these are exactly the issues that are coming up all over the world in federal states. How much redistribution can a federal polity handle, right? There is one, people would say, see, the case for redistribution is poor states need more, etc.
I do want to say there's a bit of a contradiction in your book, because in another chapter you're saying the rich and poor
are diverging.
It's not that India is becoming more equal, and then you're saying maybe you shouldn't redistribute so much. So explain the two.
Yeah, they're not contradictory at all, because I think that many would argue, or some economists would argue, that when you do this redistribution, it's a bit like, in the foreign aid literature, you have something called the aid curse, that you give money and it dents the incentives to take action for tax collection and so on.
But is that a bit regressive, that view?
No, in fact, I think that the international view is that foreign aid is, it's a paper that, remember you interviewed Raghu and me, we had this.
Right. Yes.
So I think, I don't want to make it strictly.
Are you saying that the rich states are being taxed too much, so there's disincentive, or are you saying the poor are being given too much, so there's this regressive impact?
See, I think there's a bit of both, because on the receiving side, if you know that you're just going to get money regardless of your effort, your own tax effort, then this is...
It doesn't make you improve.
And on the giving side, remember that it has to be broadly politically acceptable. So far, we've had no issues with that, but we did see some murmurs of discontent coming up. So I think we need to be honest about this, and maybe think about, maybe not eliminate by any means. Maybe we could think of ways in which you could condition this, or do it over a longer period of time.
Right.
But these are hard questions that the Finance Commission,
which you have taken on, and they're good to read and think about. The other thing that you do talk about, and it's an issue that is becoming increasingly important looking ahead, and that is freebies versus welfare handouts. Now, that's becoming more and more important in every election now, and every government is giving, and there is a distinction between giving a freebie like, a television set or something, or you give something which genuinely changes
people's lives.
Girls' child education, a cycle to a girl child so she can go to school and back, change their lives, and those government is meant to do, and that's part of your UBI also. That's not a freebie.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly.
So, is it okay to give handouts, and is that the future? Actual welfare handouts?
See, I think that there is maybe categories I'm mixing or not fully understanding, but see, there's a freebie where you just give stuff away, right?
Small stuff which is just for...
Yeah, right. Then I think what, in some sense, the animating vision of this government on this issue is that providing essential private goods and services to the poor, cooking gas, toilets, power, housing. I think that is, a very legitimate alternative vision of welfareism that I think this government is embracing.
Which this government and all state governments are increasingly doing.
But I think it's one thing to say we're going to provide toilets, because there is remember the old literature that you must have been familiar with, basic needs.
Why, just because it's old?
Because it's our time.
Our time, yes.
It's our time.
Better,
yeah, exactly. It's our time. It goes
that was
back
quick.
Yeah, I think to say some basic needs like health, toilets, power, etc. They are basic needs, right? So in that sense,
or even midday meals for school children.
Exactly. All of that. But I think, but of course, what I think few governments in India over 75 years have succeeded is really providing a good primary education and accessible health as well. I think health and education are our two.
Give it as handouts, and those are good things to do.
Those are public goods.
But then economists like you will say, but what about the fiscal deficit? What about our debt?
No. If it comes to providing health and education, I think it has to be done in the public sector. I think the returns are huge, but the problem is that we haven't cracked. We don't have good models of good delivery of health and education.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's what we have.
And one other thing I did notice in all our travels, that if you're giving a welfare handout, make sure everybody gets it, because if some get it, there's huge resentment, number one, and B, officials know there's a shortage and they use it for favors.
Exactly. That targeting, that comes back to the whole
targeting and
the leakages. But also there's a big, I think, kind of maxim in kind of public welfare economics that the more universalized the benefit, the more it has political sustainability.
Right.
So in that sense as well.
Yeah, and you do raise these issues, and I really enjoyed reading that. And I would say the most important issue in this whole discussion, looking ahead, is this issue. Wait for it. Will Arvind Subramanian ever return to India? Are you crazy, or are you?
Let me make first a confession: is that I miss India very badly, very badly.
I've always thought you're a bit crazy.
In fact, when I landed in Delhi,
I love my country. I'm here, but you know the theory of revealed preference, right?
Very good point. I think you're hitting at the right places.
But maybe some of us don't have those options also.
No. But I think
are you? What's your feeling? You miss India?
Yeah, and the sense that you're part of this great country, involved in all these big issues.
You're involved.
But on the question, I have an answer to your question.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you'll never say yes or no.
The Buddhists say, forget the past, forget the future. So these are all future questions. Live in the present. So for the moment, I'm
just longing to interview you after you become RBI chief and say, we have no excess capital. We really need this for.
And why didn't you solve the third generation NBFC problem?
Yeah, but I still feel now that you've given up hard work, gone to Harvard.
Good pun.
It's not original, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Why would you come back? Because you're more involved with the environment here, with the country.
Yeah, I think that we for personal reasons we have to be in the US and whatever, and it's a different life. We get used to it, but you can take me out of India, but you can't take India out of me.
Yeah.
Or Indian economic policy. Never.
And I'm going to raise a huge rumor. You have an American passport. No, you don't.
No, I don't.
Thank God. I know that. That's why I raised it.
Good.
But before anybody else spreads the fake news, I thought I'd finish that. I guess the last thing I need to ask you is, you've written very strongly about truth to power, and that is lacking in India. That you call the fawning elite. I think you mentioned media in it as well.
Yes.
But yeah, media is becoming fawning. There are financial analysts who tell you privately, this is just terrible, but publicly, wonderful, and they say, I have to do it. The fawning elite is frustrating, isn't it?
It is frustrating. I remember, I won't take names, saying how on every post-budget speech, on camera, greatest budget ever. Off camera, what a lousy budget, right?
Exactly.
See, I think that just to add to that, to some extent, when I spoke out against RBI or some other policies of the government, for example, part of it was a response to this, kind of fawning elite that, others are not doing it. And, I don't want to be too harsh because everyone has his or own constraints.
And I hear many meetings you were not invited to because you were not a fawning elite. Time you became a fawning elite if you come back.
I should join the media.
Oh dear, not NDTV, fortunately. But thank you very much. This is really a very good book. And as you can imagine from what you've heard, lots to learn, lots to think about, and simply written. Not for intellectuals like me, but for people like you. It's.
But can I say, Prannoy, all the nice things that you say.
It really is very good.
I miss the Roy Subramaniam Jugalbandis.
We'll do it. We'll catch you doing hard work. No hard work in Harvard. Yes, we'll do that. Thank you very much and congratulations. Go out and get it. And I'm not plugging it. It's seriously worth reading. Thanks very much again.
Thanks. Lovely to be here as always.